think we necessarily need one.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, donc de mon côté, or on my side, all I'm taking are media, and it doesn't matter the order, if I understand correctly.
No, no, I think it'll be as you wish.
Okay, perfect. So, well, I take them in order that they queue up, basically.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll signal to you once we're done the opening remarks. I'll signal to you that you can go to the phone lines.
Certainly. And when we have no more questions, I'll simply state the last question. And if we are close on time, then I'll wait on your cue, basically, to say that this will be the last question. If ever there's more than
for sure
than what I have time for, basically.
Great.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go ahead and transfer the lines. You'll be hearing music briefly as I do so. I'll then remove the music, and when everything is silent and the recording that warns you that the call is being recorded, when that is done, that will be your cue to begin. Everything that you say from this moment on can be heard in the conference. Please stand by.
This conference is being recorded. Cette conférence est enregistrée.
Just so before you start, Andrew, Kelly, if you can turn on your camera if you have one, please, thank you. And you can start whenever you want.
Great. Good morning. Bonjour. My name is Andrew Swift, and I'm from the Communications Branch of the Department of Justice. Merci de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui à l'occasion de l'annonce d'un financement pour cette importante initiative.
Thank you for joining us.
I have with me on the line the Honourable David Lametti, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, the Honourable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations, the Honourable Marc Miller, Minister of Indigenous Services. I also have Professor Hadley Friedland, co-founder of the Wakatoan Law and Governance Lodge, Corin Lightning Earl from the Wakatoan Law and Governance Lodge, and finally Tom McDonald, President of the Siniswish-Winiwak Nation. We will have the opportunity to hear short opening remarks from each of our guests, then we will go to a Q&A over the phone lines. As usual, we will go with a one question, one follow-up. Le format est d'une question avec une suivi. S'il vous plaît, posez vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Feel free to ask your question in either official language. Je cède maintenant la parole à l'honorable Ministre Lametti, who will say a few words. Minister Lametti, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour. Greetings from my office in Ottawa, actually, which is situated on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. Pleased to join my colleagues, Ministers Bennett and Miller, along with Professor Hadley Friedland, co-founder of the Wahcoton Law and Governance Lodge, Corin Lightning Earl, a lawyer at Wahcoton, and Tom McDonald, the president of the Siniswish-Winiwak Nation. Cette annonce est importante, tant pour notre gouvernement que pour moi personnellement, puisque j'ai consacré une bonne partie de ma vie à l'enseignement du droit et à la service du pluralisme juridique. Il s'agit d'une réponse directe à l'appel de l'action numéro 50 de la Commission de vérité et réconciliation. Cet appel à l'action demande au gouvernement de collaborer avec les peuples autochtones afin d'actualiser leur système juridique et de financer les instituts de droit autochtone. Ce sont des derniers qui l'élaborent, l'appliquent et améliorent la compréhension des lois autochtones selon les cultures uniques des peuples autochtones du Canada. Le budget de 2019 prévoyait 10 millions de dollars en 5 ans pour soutenir des initiatives de droit autochtone partout au Canada dans le cadre du programme juridique de partenariat et d'innovation. Ce programme vise à améliorer l'accès à la justice et s'attaquer aux nouveaux enjeux du système de justice canadien. Nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui pour parler de ce financement. Today, we're pleased to announce funding of almost $9.5 million for 21 projects across the country. These projects will be led by or developed in partnership with Indigenous organizations. They'll focus on research activities, workshops, and other initiatives that best fit the needs of each diverse community. Several projects involve partnerships with law schools and other legal stakeholders with the goal of researching and developing governance laws based on traditional Indigenous justice and normative systems. Others are focused on creating a written record of ancestral wisdom and knowledge from elders and knowledge keepers so that the communities can understand and revitalize their traditional laws. Still others aim to develop accessible and clear public legal education materials for community members. The materials will cover such important topics as constitutionalism, citizenship, and child welfare. The funding will help make a real difference for Indigenous communities doing the challenging but important work of revitalizing legal systems. Tous ces projets ajouteront à l'ensemble de plus en plus vaste de connaissances sur les lois et traditions juridiques autochtones, profitant non seulement aux peuples autochtones, mais aussi à tous les Canadiens. La diversité est une partie intégrante de notre système juridique. Historiquement, nous nous appuyons sur deux systèmes distincts, la common law et le droit civil, et de plus en plus les préceptes juridiques autochtones qui gouvernaient ce territoire historiquement avant l'arrivée des Européens, influencent les décisions judiciaires et la pratique du droit. We also know that the administration of justice is a core element of self-determination and governance for Indigenous peoples. So I'm keenly excited by the 21 projects that we are partnering in and investing in. They will help advance the cause of reconciliation, and they will help build a new path forward that focuses on the needs, the promise, and the potential of all Indigenous peoples. Thank you. Merci. And now I will ask Minister Bennett to say a few words.
Kwei, Ulukut, Tansi, hello, bonjour. Je tiens à souligner que je vous parle du territoire traditionnel de la Première Nation des Mississauga de Crédit, où nous honorons tous les peuples autochtones qui ont pagayé ces eaux et dans les mocassins ont parcouru ces terres. Je tiens également à reconnaître les nombreux territoires traditionnels sur lesquels vous vous trouvez aujourd'hui. Je suis heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui avec le ministre Lametti et le ministre Miller pour faire un autre pas en avant, ensemble, sur le chemin commun de la réconciliation avec les Premières Nations. Canadian law, dignity, inclusion, but is executed in a way that actually works for Indigenous people and has been their historic ways of taking decisions. Revitalizing Indigenous laws, legal institutions, and legal processes is essential to rebuilding healthy, self-governing, and lawful Indigenous communities. Today's announcement expands on the leadership and advocacy of Professors Val Napoleon and John Burroughs. I remember fondly the beautiful ceremony in June 2019 for its opening with support for our government, from our government. And I remember the important conversations with the JD students and the always inspiring teachings of Dr. Burroughs and Dr. Napoleon. They are breaking new ground in their research and scholarly pursuits that will make the legal plurality with Indigenous laws a reality. Their students and faculty are collaborating directly with communities to modernize and articulate Indigenous laws to reach community goals. And ever since I heard of the idea of a National Center for Indigenous Laws, I knew how important it would be for Canada on our shared path of reconciliation and the path to self-determination for Indigenous nations. This work is spreading across the country as today's announcement furthers this work in communities and universities across the country. And self-government agreements and other constructive arrangements are an opportunity to restore Indigenous control over their own affairs and to implement their right to self-determination and a better future for their communities. Through these types of agreements, Canada and nations are working together to undo the federally imposed systems of governance and restore Indigenous control over how their communities are governed and how their programs and services are delivered based on their traditional laws and legal customs. So some examples of where nations have incorporated traditional elements into their government's practices include Niska, Seychelles, Tuasin. These agreements have helped to define, build, and strengthen nations across Canada and the relationship to Canada. Anishinaabe Nation is also pursuing an incremental approach to implement their vision of self-government and self-determination. This includes a number of complementary initiatives Anishinaabe Nation have initiated to improve the well-being of Anishinaabe children, youth, and families in their child well-being law. Actions taken, as Minister Lametti said, to address Call to Action 50 need to allow the space for Indigenous peoples to develop their own unique responses to the challenges facing their communities. This can never be one size fits all. It has to be that we understand traditional Inuit legal practices differ from the laws instituted in various First Nations communities, which differ from the legal frameworks adopted by various Métis nations. Ultimately, these projects further support the self-determination of Indigenous people, a goal that is enshrined in the spirit of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Along with fulfilling our collective responsibility to implement the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, these projects also address the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report, which states that revitalizing and recognition of Indigenous laws are essential to reconciliation in Canada, and this fact was echoed by the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Calls for Justice, which calls for the inclusion of Indigenous laws and protocols to ensure the safety of women, girls, and to us LGBTQIA+ people. By incorporating Indigenous laws into practice, we are reaffirming the power and place of Indigenous peoples here in Canada. Nous sommes impatients de voir les communautés mettre leurs lois en pratique, contribuant ainsi l'avènement du Canada plus juste, plus inclusif, qui répond aux besoins des peuples autochtones. Miigwech, Kuyanomik, merci, thank you, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister Bennett. I will now turn it over to Minister Miller to say a few words. Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Thank you. Kwekwe ulukut, tanse, hello, et bonjour. As I'm in Ottawa, I first would like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you here today from the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and pleased to connect with you from the various territories and communities that you are all in here today, albeit remotely. I'm pleased to be here to support the revitalization of Indigenous legal systems and traditions through the funding of these important projects. And there is much we can and must learn from Indigenous traditions and traditional ways of knowing. The law, systems of justice, and legal institutions are an ecosystem that can thrive with the addition of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis knowledge. Vitalizing these legal traditions will take the support of Indigenous communities foremost, their members, elders, scholars, and all who believe in supporting a renewed legal relationship. The expansion of the Gladue principle and the use of restorative justice are just small, important examples of Indigenous legal principles already being integrated and used in everyday legal proceedings. We can take these experiences and turn them into learning opportunities as we work together to expand legal principles and institute Indigenous laws across Canada. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Call to Action 50 provides an opportunity for the instruments of law to work for the benefit of Indigenous communities. The projects today highlighted are the wings to flight we hope will soar well beyond the revitalization of law and into other institutions. Ça me donne beaucoup d'espoir de voir les traditions juridiques relatives aux terres, à la terre, à la rédaction législative, à la garde d'enfants, à la protection des enfants et à l'accessibilité à l'éducation juridique incluses dans les projets que nous appuyons aujourd'hui. Merci à toutes les communautés et nations autochtones pour vos projets innovateurs et merci à tous ceux qui contribueront à ce projet. Dans les années à venir, vous serez des points d'ancrage importants de la confiance, des sources de vérité et des piliers de précédent alors que nous travaillons ensemble pour revitaliser et reconnaître le droit autochtone. Ensemble, nous pouvons marcher sur le chemin de la réconciliation. Ce chemin est partagé, il est apprécié, il est bien en vie. Miigwech, Kunanomik, merci, thank you, et merci.
Merci beaucoup, Minister Miller. I will now turn it over to Professor Hadley Freeland of the Wakatoan Law and Governance Lodge to say a couple of words.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister Bennett, Minister Lametti, and Minister Miller. We're honored to join you here today from Treaty 6 territory. Dr. Shailene Jobin from the University of Alberta Faculty of Native Studies and I started the Wakatoan Lodge in 2018 in response to Indigenous communities and organizations asking for a research center to support their important work revitalizing and developing Indigenous laws, and in the spirit of Call to Action number 50. We're grateful for the support of the Call to Action Justice Partnership and Innovation Grant. It's enabled us to broaden the scope of our work and make our resources more accessible, including holding a methods workshop with Indigenous representatives and legal professionals doing this work from all across Canada, more than 50 people gathering, and translating some of our website resources from English into French and into Cree. We look forward to continuing the work of supporting and upholding the laws of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Corin Lightning Earl.
Tanse, thank you, Hadley. The Crown Law and Governance Lodge is a dedicated research unit. We're based out of the University of Alberta. The objective of upholding Indigenous laws and governance through community-directed research and learning. Our goals are to support Indigenous communities to identify, articulate, and implement their own laws and governance. We support them by developing, gathering, and amplifying wise practices. We provide them with research methods and research tools. We provide useful and accessible public legal education and practical governance tools. We also create connections with other lawyers and community members doing this work and create opportunities for individuals to feel empowered and supported through the work that they're doing. We hold wisdom workshops and gatherings where Indigenous people from many different nations, communities, and backgrounds can share their knowledge and wisdom with each other. We hold methods workshops and training on resurgent methods that can be used to pursue Indigenous people's own goals for law and governance work. This empowers the communities to rebuild and breathe life into their own governance systems. We also believe in providing accessible and clear language public legal education about laws such as Bill C-92, so Indigenous people can make informed decisions about how to use the opportunities and address the potential challenges. Indigenous law revitalization is of the utmost importance to us at the Lodge as it is Canada. So much was taken away from Indigenous people. Through revitalizing laws, we can breathe life back into our nations and our societies. We can repair the harms and create stronger nations. Many of us Indigenous people follow Indigenous laws every day and Canadian law. And through revitalizing and recognition of those Indigenous laws, we can honor our histories and our ancestors. We can do more intense community-led research projects, and we work in partnership with communities, organizations, and nations, and continue to support them in their own law and governance journey. I will now introduce the leader of one of our partner communities, the Sinewichi-Winiwak Nation, Tom McDonald, to give an example of one project.
Tansi, thank you, Corin and Hadley, and thank you for having me here, Minister Bennett, Minister Lametti, and Minister Miller. I am joining you here today from Sinewichi-Winiwak Nation territory. I want to briefly talk about the work we did with the Wakatoan Lodge in the last 2 years on Sinewichi-Winiwak citizenship. We know who we are. Our name, Sinewichi-Winiwak, means the mountain people, and our elders tell us we have been here a very long time. Other Indigenous peoples recognize us as the mountain people and respect us for our traditional knowledge. We know who we are, but we have never lived under the Indian Act. We have also never lived in a treaty relationship with Canada. In 2018, we were told that nobody knew who we were and whether we were Indigenous. We were told we should work on a new membership code. We partnered with the Wahkotowan Lodge because we wanted a law that reflects who we are, our core values, and our unique way of life. We did not want a citizenship code that just mirrors the Indian Act. At the same time, we had to understand the Indian Act and why we are so invisible to non-Indigenous people without it. A working group led the process, which concluded by bringing everything together to give instructions to Corin, who understood and prepared the draft citizenship code for us, along with the final report. Over 2 years, the research process was always community-directed and holistic. It included several different aspects, including community gatherings and ceremony as instructed by our elders, a youth-led film about our history, identity, and belonging, over 70 home visits, educational sessions and resources to try to understand the Canadian law impacting us, using language-based methods to center and explain 7 Cree principles which reflect our own laws and way of life. I will say the 7 principles in our language. I don't have time to translate. However, there are information sheets available on Wahkotowan Lodge website, and we have these booklets that explain each one in English. The 7 guiding principles are: number 1, Nehio Matsuan; number 2, Nehio Erin; number 3, Wahkotowan; number 4, Meoichiituan; number 5, Sitoskatuan; number 6, Managitauan; number 7, Tapuawin. By working with the Wahkotowan Lodge, we were able to do this work building on our strengths. 60% of our community members still speak Cree as their primary language at home. The work we did on the 7 principles particularly has grown beyond just citizenship to be applied to many aspects of our governance and relationships. We have shared outcomes of this work with industry partners and all the local schools. We have applied them to more mindfully to employment issues and child welfare issues. It has restarted many important conversations in our community. There was a lot of fear, like in many communities, that the issue of membership would tear us apart. Instead, going about it this way with our working group and the Wahkotowan Lodge team, we have worked toward greater unity by affirming our shared values and the ongoing value of our own way of life. We know who we are, the Asimachi Winiok. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now ask the operator to begin the question and answer session. Je vais maintenant demander à l'opérateur d'ouvrir la période de questions et réponses.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. There'll be a brief pause while the participants register for questions. Il y aura un court délai vous permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions. Thank you for your patience. Merci de patienter. Once again, please press star 1 if you have a question. De nouveau, n'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. Our first question, la première question, Jamie Pashagash comme APTN. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Hi, sorry for sort of that. Just for clarification, you're announcing $9.5 million today for 21 projects. Is this in addition to the, I believe it was $10 million promised in 2019?
Thank you for that question, Jamie. It's operationalizing the 10 million. So we announced it in budget 2019. We went through a process of application and process selection, working with partners to refine and elaborate their projects. And so this is that money that is now being now being announced formally.
Okay, and it's supposed to be for the next 5 years. Is there any plans going forward for something ongoing?
Well, we received great projects, which we are supporting today. There were other good projects too, and certainly I would like, as Minister of Justice, working with Indigenous partners to continue with these kinds of projects. And so I'm going to keep as minister after the Minister of Finance, and keep pressing for these kinds of really meaningful investments. And the other thing is, I say this with a smile, but I'm pretty confident that these 21 projects are going to be a great success, and that will help other subsequent rounds of funding.
Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, please press *1 if you have a question. De nouveau, n'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. There are no further questions registered at this time. Nous n'avons plus de questions pour le moment.
Thank you very much. As that's the only questions we've received, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, the ministers and our esteemed guests. And I want to thank you very much. If you have any questions about today's announcement, you can please contact the Department of Justice Media Relations at media@justice.gc.ca. Si vous avez des questions au sujet de l'annonce faite aujourd'hui, veuillez communiquer avec les relations avec les médias du ministère de la Justice à media@justice.gc.ca. Again, thank you very much for joining us today. Have a good day.